so that I can introduce you to the participants.
Sure, sir.
Sir,
Can you see me, sir?
yes, yes.
Hi. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Dr. Dhaval Bhojani, on behalf of Electronics and Communication Department, GEC Rajkot, I warmly welcome the expert for this session. Let me introduce you all to the expert. Ms. Mansi Masrani is right now working in the Intel Bangalore. She is actually alumni of our department only. She has done his master's in VLSI design from Nirma University, and then she has started working in the industry. She has started his career as an intern in the memory compiler team. Then she has later become an FEV, that is functional equivalent check engineer, that is for the SPOC team and IP team. She currently serve as an FEV lead for the teams along with handling physical design for latest generation of CPU cores. Her knowledge span is spread across the synthesis, FEV design for test and place, routing, reliability and verification and everything. Beyond the technical aspects, actually, she likes to paint, dance, write the sonnets, and she also leads one team, GPTW team, which is regularly arranging some fun activities and everything in the Bangalore. So this was a brief about the expert of this session. Now I welcome Mrs. Mansi Masrani, and I am handing over to you the session. Just I let you know about a few technicalities of session. Whenever you are going to start presenting, you won't be able to see the screen of MS Team. So in the chat box, the participants are going to ask the questions during the session, and I would be with you during the session. I would be delivering you the questions and you can reply to the participants.
Sure,
So this would be the procedure for the session. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much for joining the session.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So my request is if I'm disconnected or so, please let me know immediately. So I'll connect back within 2 minutes or so. And hello all. I am gonna, stop my video and start presenting so that my bandwidth doesn't kill the presentation. I hope everybody is doing well. And let's start. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen. Are you able to see?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So
Yes, it is visible now.
okay, sure. So we have gone through VLSI basic design flow yesterday. I also attended one of the sessions yesterday, and we came to know about the basic VLSI design flow, which started from RTL. Then it goes through the RTL verification. Then it goes through synthesis. Then it goes through floor plan and placement, clock and route. Then you check the logic equivalence between all this netlist, and finally what comes as sign off. So today's scope of this presentation is mainly focused on synthesis. So let's start. So basically synthesis is transforming your HDL design, whichever RTL code you have written, whether it's in VHDL or Verilog, that you have to transform into technology specific gate level netlist, which is the netlist which is formed by all the gates, which is AND, OR, NAND, NOR, all the gates with specified constraints. We will talk about what is constraints and how do we form them, and all the optimization settings which we require. The tools mainly focused which are used by all the companies recently is Design Compiler by Synopsys, GNS by Cadence, and there are some other tools. Synopsys has also come up with a new next generation tool which is called Fusion Compiler, which does the synthesis plus floor plan and placement all together. Now, why do we need a tool for going through the synthesis? Why don't we just, take a paper, read the RTL code, and transform it into gate level netlist? That is, we are all, well versed with that, how to do. But the RTL code which is written involves millions of gates. It's not possible for a human to do that. So to reduce a manual error and bug, to make sure that we don't hit time to market, then to generate a netlist which is well balanced on PPA targets. We will be using this short form throughout the presentation, which is called PPA, which is power, performance, and area. Any of your design should be well balanced on this. It should not be the case that your design is hitting 3 gigahertz, but it is so power hungry that you cannot even touch the device. It's so hot. So it should be well balanced on both the terms. Now, it also helps us with generic netlist, which is not technology dependent. What I mean by it is, it's generic netlist. It has all the gate level information, but it is not mapped to the recent technology with which you are making the product of. So what you can do is you can take that generic netlist and you can use it with two different products. One can be on 22 nanometer, one can be on 14 nanometer, which will help us to get more features in the product. Stop me whenever you want me to stop there, and you have questions or you have any things, doubts or anything, and just keep talking to me so that I know that I'm connected to you. Okay, so this is basic synthesis flow. It starts with RTL reading. It just doesn't read only RTL. It requires additional inputs also, which are read with along with the RTL. So the first thing is RTL design itself. Then the next thing is design constraints. Again, we will talk about this. These constraints are put in the tool to make sure that our design comes pretty well balanced on PPA targets. Then there are some specific user constraints that also we will talk about. Then there are libraries. Libraries are in two parts. One is timing and power, and the second is physical. Timing and power has all the information related to power numbers, leakage, dynamic power. The timing information has all the setup requirement, hold requirement, delay arcs, and all those things. Whereas the physical libraries have area related information, frame cells basically. Here is more detailed into that. So the inputs we listed out was RTL, which has to be properly verified. That's what RTL verification team will do. Libraries, which has timing and power models, physical models, and design constraints, well based on, whenever I say performance, it's always timing, because performance is actually measured on the speed of the device, which is nothing but the timing, power, and area. So PPA, and on top of that, we do user defined constraints. Okay, now I'm going to take a small quiz of 2-3 questions so that I know you guys are connected and you are hearing me well. Okay, so first question, whoever wants to go. Why do we keep NMOS? Sure, yeah. Hello. Yes, please ask. Is anybody there? Okay, so my first question is, why do we keep NMOS towards ground and PMOS towards supply, which is power, in a normal CMOS model? Why do we do that?
For elimination of the bulk effect, madam, at the same time fabrication limitation.
Okay, anybody else? What's the main basic reason? What's the bulk effect which you are talking about? Yeah.
Then the source and bulk potential may vary, then threshold
Okay.
voltage may vary, then
Okay.
the device, the individual transistor switch on voltage may be varies, madam.
Okay, so my another question goes, when you are using NMOS as a pass transistor, does it transfer strong one or weak one?
Weak one, madam. The VDD minus VT you will get, madam.
Correct,
VDD minus.
correct. So that is the reason that PMOS always transfers strong one, NMOS always transfers strong zero. So when we put NMOS towards the ground side, it will give us an actual inverter, which is very strong, strong 1 and strong 0. Now next question, whose mobility is higher, holes or electrons?
Electrons, madam, electrons.
Sure. So that's
Electrons.
why NMOS is faster. Okay, keep this in mind, because as soon as I'm taking you towards library, we'll have to keep all this into mind to understand how is library built off. Okay, now you know that electrons mobility is higher and NMOS is faster, then which is better in terms of speed, NAND or NOR?
NAND, ma'am, NAND, ma'am.
Okay, and why?
While going for a switch transition from 1 to 0, we are dealing with the NMOSes, madam.
Correct, but then what happens to PMOS? PMOS are in parallel and they are
PMOS, with respect to the PMOS, so any one transistor will switch on for the transition from 0 to 1. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Sure, thank you. So that's why we use NAND mostly, because it's better in terms of speed, and PMOS we don't have to double the W by L every time to make sure it's faster. Okay, now the same question. What is W by L in a transistor and what is the relation of that with speed?
2.5 times.
No, but why would you keep 2.5? 2.5 times is
Yes, madam.
kept in order to achieve something. What is it that we are achieving?
Symmetrical, generally for any technology, we used to verify for the PMOS and NMOS for the symmetrical threshold point, madam. V in and V out should be equal to the supply voltage by 2, madam, like that.
So what happens actually is when you go symmetrical, then in that case W and L should be same.
Okay, ma'am.
Correct. Now we are putting it 2.5 times because electrons are faster, 2.5 times faster than, and that's why we put, the width is 2.5 times then NMOS, then what happens is PMOS becomes as comparable as fast to NMOS, and that's how our whole device becomes fast, or else PMOS stays slower, which actually slows down the whole device. So that is the reason. So W by L is called the drive strength of the device. If W by L is higher, the drive strength of the device is higher, the device is faster than the normal device, which has W by L equals to 1. Okay. Okay. Now the second thing is, how do we decide the cell height? So the cell height is decided based on any standard cell. The main standard cell which we take into consideration is always 2-input NAND, because of the same reasons we talked about just before. Now what happens is the height between the power rail and the ground rail. Here if you see VDD and the ground, the height between that is called the cell height. That is the standard cell height. Based on this also, library will have different kind of parameters defined, and which we will change the libraries when we want to use different kind of cell heights. Okay, and the cell width is normally measured with the difference between two poly pitch, that is this A and B, plus the spaces, the half poly pitch spaces on the both sides. That is called cell width of the standard cell. Okay, now let's talk about the process corners. The process corners are a combination of PVT, which is process, voltage, and temperature. Now, voltage and temperature is pretty much straightforward. Whichever you want to keep, however you want to build the product, based on that, you have to use this libraries. But how is the process defined? So the process is defined based on how NMOS and PMOS are fabricated. Okay, and for that, the libraries are different. Let's say I want NMOS typical speed, PMOS typical speed, no W by L higher. Then what I'll do is I'll use both the typical W by L ratio, and that is called TT process. Now, if I want to make NMOS faster, PMOS faster, there are various ways to do that, and we will call that process as FF. If the NMOS is also slow, PMOS is also slow, we will call it SS, and the skewed version are called slow fast and fast slow. Okay. All this information gathered, we will now understand which library to use when what kind of product you want to go for. Okay. So the normal naming style of library goes like this. The first part of the library has the tech node name, which is let's say 22 nanometer, 14, 7, 3, whichever you are using, the PVT corner, the process, the voltage number, the temperature number, and the height of the cell, because it's very important. When the height of the cell is higher, that definitely means that there are some N-well width related changes which will definitely affect the devices. And then the drive strength. So here if you see, the first one is 22 nanometer. It has typical NMOS, typical PMOS, sorry. It has 0.65 volts. It is 90 degrees Celsius. The height is 100 microns and the drive strength is D2, which is W by L equals to 2. So whenever I want to go for a product which has to go into an environment where 90 degrees Celsius temperature will be existing, I will definitely go for this library. The next, if you see, is 90 nanometer. FF is PMOS is faster, NMOS is faster, 1.05 volts, 0 degrees Celsius, 300 microns of cell height, and the drive strength is D4. So this is the main library. Whenever we use .lib or something .lef, it will have this naming convention, and based on just looking at the naming, you would understand that, okay, if I want my product to be built like this, let me pick up this library. Okay. Now what will be the content of the library? So the content of the library will be in any single library. Let's say we will pick up just one, the 2210 nanometer typical and 65 volt, 90 degrees Celsius, 100 and D2. It will have all the combinational cell information, the functional information, and or not the pin information of that. It can have varied cells also, like 3 input NOR, 4 input AND, and all those. Special type of buffers like clock buffers, delay buffers, level shifters. These are all buffers, but they are specially designed. Can anybody tell me what's the difference between normal buffer and clock buffer? Are you guys able to hear me? I'm just assuming that you guys are able to hear me. So I'll tell you the difference. Yes, okay. So the difference between normal buffer and the clock buffer is the clock buffer should have the rise and fall time, which are very stringent and very similar to each other. If you take a normal buffer and you provide 0 to 1 transition to it, the 0 to 1 transition is going to be very straight, but 1 to 0, when it happens, it's going to be a very slant transition, which is not good for clock. So clock buffers are specifically designed to make sure that the rise and fall time are similar, and due to that, the W by L is higher of that, the N-well density is higher of that, and that's why the clock buffers are huge in area and they are power hungry also. And similarly, level shifters we'll talk about when we talk about power related stuff. But this is just to give you an idea that even though the buffer is the logically the buffers are same, we have to use different kind of libraries because we want to use certain type of clock buffers. Now it will also have sequential cells like latches and flops. It will have sequential cells with different kind of active set and reset, positive edge, negative edge triggered. It will have all the scan cells, which will be used in DFT, which is designed for test. And it will also have all the physical cells, which are tap, antenna, tie, fillers, and spare. We'll talk about this if the time permits. We'll talk about this into the end. Okay. Now let's go through the types of library. Now, whenever you see the library, there will be something called .lib. There will be something called .lef. So the .lib will always be power, timing, or noise kind of library. It will have all the rise and fall transitions for pins, for cells. It will have max and min capacity, which capacitive load it can take up to. It will have the maximum transition it can have. It will have the power numbers as in leakage numbers. It will have all the data related to noise information. And the .lef will be physical library, which will have all the design rules. We'll talk about the design rules maybe when I take up CTS and route related information. Then it will have metal layer information. Your design will have, can be up to 5 metal layers. It can be up to 13 metal layers. It will have all the metal layer information, the width of it, the thickness of it, the spacing of it. It will have VI information between the metal layers. It will have blockages information, pins information, the RC values of the wire itself, and the location. By what do I mean by the location is, if the certain cell is placed at certain location, how would it, what it be the polarization of it, whether it will be flipped or not, all this kind of information, and the size of the cell. So this is all the physical information for the library. Now these library can be in forms of two. One can be technology dependent library, which has all the information of your technology. If it's 22 nanometer, then the cell spacing should be something else. The metal spacing should be something else. The metal width is something else. And all the libraries of two different technology node will be different. In this also, we have two different set of libraries. Target libraries, which are specifically used to target your circuit into a product, and link libraries, which are just having the references for whatever timing and power calculations you have. The second part is technology independent, where we used instantiations or macros of reusable circuits like adders and multipliers, because whenever your RT has this operator, right, plus minus percentage or anything, that time what it does, it picks up a generic adder from all the set of libraries it has, because at that time it doesn't have any technological idea that what is the technology we are targeting to, and it makes that netlist into a generic netlist, which it's called GTechLibs. Okay, this DesignWares and GTechLibs both are generic libraries which does not have any technology dependent data. Okay, now we are done with the RTL. RTL is verified. We have taken all the libraries. Now comes the design constraints. So what are these design constraints? First of all, we'll focus on timing constraints. Let's say I am saying that my product has, if I put an input at 0 second, my product has to give me all the addition, multiplication, everything what it is meant to do, and it should give me an output at 3 seconds. So I have to set some delays for that. I have to set some constraints for that. So all this information is given by timing constraints. Delays for IO ports. Then I'm sure that you guys know what are the timing paths. If not, we are going to talk about it at the end. If the path is multi-cycle path, if the path is not meant to be a timing critical path, then it's called a false path. And max delay. Max delay is something where I specifically ask the tool that from this point to this point, my data should reach in 200 picoseconds. That's max delay path. That's the constraint I am giving. The second type of constraints are physical constraints, that I'm telling the tool that my product is the X length is 200 microns, Y is 1000 micron, and this is the physical constraint, and this is in which you have to create the design. Then I'll also give it the memory locations. When you go through floor planning and all, you will get to know that there are so many macros which you have to place into your design. So I'll put that also in synthesis. These will not be pretty much fixed in the synthesis. This we will be keeping just to let the tool know that this much area is used in memory. The rest of the area is available for your synthesis. Okay. Then physical cell locations. Every design, every product requires a set of physical cells, which also should be a part of your floor plan and placement course, where you will understand what different kind of physical cells are available and how to place them. Then comes the special constraints. These special constraints are generally user defined, as in the user sets the constraints to make sure how does he want to synthesize the design. Let's say I'm setting a design constraint saying that none of my net should have a load more than 10 or 12. Okay, then I'll set max high fan out number as 10. So my synthesis will make sure that whenever it is splitting a net into like 20 nets, it will see the constraint that, okay, I'm not allowed to. So it will split them into 12, and then out of that 12, it will split another 4, 5 into 20 or something. Okay, then max transition. Transition is very important constraint, because if your transition is too long, it is too slopey, the device is going to be too slower. So max transition, and same way max capacitance, because we know that certain kind of devices only can take up certain kind of load. More than that, if you give, it's going to break. So that kind of constraints I'm going to put it by myself. Those are called user defined special constraints. Okay. Okay, now we have completed this part. RTL and other inputs, all the inputs are given. Now the tool is ready to start the synthesis. What it will do first? So what it will do is it will read the RTL. It will check for the errors, that missing modules. Let's say if my top level design is called A, and inside that I'm calling A underscore B, A underscore C, all these designs, then it will just check for it, whether any module is missing, if the module file is there, but whether it's empty inside, even if it's not empty, whether the, the code which is defined inside that has some syntactical errors. All this is called analysis of RTL. That will happen during the analyze phase. The next will be elaborate. Now it has gone through reading of RTL correctly. Now here it had made sure that the RTL is good, it has no syntactical issues. Now it elaborates the RTL. What it does is it takes the RTL, it transforms it into generic map cells. As I talked about, right, the designwares. If it has a big adder, it uses one of the designware libraries. If it has normal combinational logic, then it will change it into AND gate, OR gate, NOR gate, something like that. So here is one of the example. RTL is AB plus CD, and it has mapped it into 2 AND gates and 1 OR gate. Okay, now it has done this. Now we have to make a product out of it, right? We have to link it to the technology. So what happens is now RTL gets linked to the PVT library, and as soon as RTL gets linked to the library, the generic netlist which we got over here, that also get maps to their respective private PVT libraries, which is like process, voltage, and technology libraries, which is definitely technology dependent. So till this part, it was generic netlist. You could save this netlist and use it for any other technology. And for this, we will go forward and use it for the certain technology where we want to productize the design. Okay. Now let's say it has already mapped. It has already made the combo cells and all. Do you think it's enough? We have got our gate level netlist. Do you think it's enough? What do you guys think? Can anybody tell me? You guys are able to hear me? Just say yes, and then we'll proceed.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
okay, sure. So let's say RTL had just had 2-3 lines, okay, and it said that A plus B into C, something like that, and we mapped it to the gate level representation where we use so many gates. But do you think I should use so many gates and just tell that, okay, productize this design because it's done? No, right? There is some noise over there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we cannot just blindly productize the design because that is not optimized, well balanced on PPA targets. Okay, it has number of gates which are not even required. What if it had a long buffer chain which didn't even mean anything? So what the tool does is now whatever user constraints we had given, right, it starts reading that, and based on that it understands that okay, the user wants power to be this much, area to be this much, and timing, the clock period is this much, so I should start balancing the design. So what it does is it optimizes, and there are various stages in which it optimizes. Let's start with that. So the first one is architectural optimization. Whenever it reads RTL, it looks for it that wherever I am finding common logic, let's say A plus B is used everywhere, then it understands that it does not have to synthesize A plus B every time, everywhere it's used. What it will do is, once the A plus B is used, it will call it one instance and it will keep reusing it wherever it's required. That is called sharing common logic. The same thing is selecting implementations, as in if it says that it is going to do A plus B, and now instead of synthesizing it, what if it already has a library available for an adder, which is well balanced on PPA targets. Our libraries are always well balanced on PPA targets. They are timing clean, they are not power hungry, they are the leakage is low. So it directly use that implementation. It can directly use it and put it into the design. Then it also reorders the operators to make sure that the instantiation is minimum. It should not have a lot of gates, unnecessary gates. It makes sure that it uses minimum number of gates and builds the design. That is architectural optimization. Then it comes to logic level optimization. What it does is it restructures the whole netlist. It reduces the number of gates which are required by removing unnecessary gates. Then it transforms multi-level logic into SOP form. What is SOP form? And or array form, right? It transforms everything into and into array kind of thing. Then the next what it does is it ungroups the hierarchies. Our top level design will have a set of hierarchies inside. So what it does is when it has a lot of hierarchy, the tool what it does is it first makes the bottom level hierarchy, then it goes to the parent level hierarchy, then it goes to the parent level hierarchy. In this process, it does not remove unnecessary gates because it thinks that if the user had built this hierarchy with these many gates, the user requires it, which is not true. So what we ask tool is whenever you feel that the netlist should be optimized properly, you can ungroup. Okay. And the boundary optimization. Boundary optimization is nothing but whenever the hierarchies are ungrouped, if there are additional cells in one or the other hierarchy, it can actually optimize them through the boundary of this hierarchy. This is logic level optimization. Now starts the gate level optimization, the last level optimization, which is retiming. I'm going to talk about all this in the next slides. So let me go through these and then we'll talk about that. So after all this optimization is done, right, what it does is it checks on the specific paths that let's say my whole design is now well balanced, but there are very critical paths where it's still violating some of the constraints. So it works on it. But while working on it and fixing the power, area, and timing on it, if it sees that, okay, my power is going way too off when I'm trying to balance the timing, then what it does is it lets the timing go unfixable. Okay, it can violate the timing, but it will first fix power and area. Can anybody tell me why? So the reason is that our design, we are always going to go through some static timing analysis. We are going to build the clock tree properly. We are going to reroute the nets after this. So the timing part can be met later in the other stages of VLSI design. But once if your design is very power hungry and huge in area, you cannot constrain them in the later stages. So what it does, it lets the timing go bad, but it fixes the power and area targets. Okay, now let's talk about the gate level optimizations again. So here, this is called retiming. What is retiming is when you see over here that the first flop and the second flop, in between there are two combinational logic. This is just to give you an idea that there are two sets of combinational logic, but it can be a bigger combo logic, which can be divided into two parts. And what it does is, let's say my clock period is just 10, clock period is 10 nanosecond. So from here to here, my data should reach within 10 nanosecond. But if you see over here, it's reaching within 20. The data path itself is taking 20, and there is no way I could optimize that. So what the tool does is, it does that it takes some part of this combo logic and shifts it after this flop. Can you see? This multiplier is shifted after this flop. Can anybody tell me what can go wrong during this? So what happens during this is the functionality of this D pin has changed. If let's say this was A and this is B, so B was something like some adder into multiplication, but here what is happening is the multiplication is totally coming after this pin. So the logic combo path for this pin and this pin has changed. This can result into functional equivalence failures, which we will talk about when we talk about functional equivalence. But this is one of the optimization which will take care of high data path delay paths. Okay, and this has to be taken very, the tool has to make sure that it does not change the functional equivalence, and then it has to do that, which is very critical but very necessary for the critical timing parts. The next is pipelining. So what happens in pipelining is same like the previous. If this was taking 20 nanoseconds and there is no way I could optimize it, what it will do is it will add one more flop after this FF2, and it will add one more FF3 like here, and it will divide this combo logic into two parts, 10 nanoseconds and 10 nanoseconds. This is called pipelining. Okay. Now resizing and swapping. So there is a difference between resizing and swapping. Resizing is changing the drive strength of the device. So when you change the drive strength of the device from lower to higher, the cells become faster. And when you change the drive strength from higher to lower, the cells become slower. This helps in resolving the max cap and max tran violations during the synthesis. The swapping is different. Swapping is changing the VT type of the device. You know, right? VT type, high VT cells are slower but less leaky, and the ultra low VT is fastest but most leakier devices. So the tool analyzes the things, whether this path is timing critical or power critical, what cell should I use over there, and then it swaps it during the optimization. And the last is buffering and splitting. So buffering is inserting lots of buffer in the same path just to make sure that the signal gets strengthened, and it also resolves the max tran violations, because the more buffers you add in the path, the transition is going to be more stricter. It's not going to be more slopey, and the delay will be much lesser in that. Though the added buffers will insert the cell delays, but that can be taken care at the later stage. Now the splitting. Splitting is nothing but you divide one driver or one net into two or more drivers, which helps in reducing the output cap of each driver. So it automatically resolves the max cap violations. So these are all the optimization through which the tool, optimizes the design. So what happens is you have taken an RTL code. When you changed it into generic netlist, it had so many gates and it was using so much of area, but when you went through the optimization, it became so smaller design, and it was well balanced on PPA, and you are saving on area also. So this is how the whole synthesis flow looks like, and at the end of this we get a netlist which is well balanced on PPA. Okay, once the netlist is formed, we have received the netlist. Then there is one stage called DFT. We change all the flops into scan flops so that the design can be used under test. Can anybody tell me the full form of DFT?
Design for testability model.
Design for testable.
Correct. So what it does is now I have to test my whole design, right? I cannot just blindly go and send this netlist to the fabrication and tell them to fabricate it until and unless I've tested that there are no faults in the design. For that, my each and every flop has to go become a scan flop so that I can do the, I can control the inputs and I can observe the outputs. That's how controllability and observability comes into picture, and I can test my whole design. Okay, and for this, the entire I think 2 hours session is also there, so I'm not going to talk more about it. But as soon as you add this in the synthesis, your cells are going to be huge in the area, right? And you will have to go through one more round of optimization, because now it will be again messing up with your PPA targets. So after this is done, we do one more round of optimization. and then the final synthesis gets ready, which after the netlist which we have got, we will analyze it. How will we analyze it is, yeah, anybody has questions? Okay, so how will we analyze it? We will check whether we have missed out that a certain set of flops does not even have clock. So that is not good for the design, right? That means we are missing out a whole chunk of the design which does not even have clock. They are not even going to get timed. So we check on that. We check on the flops which doesn't have the output load. It's not, the flop is there, but the output is not connected to anything. So we have to check for that kind of paths. And we will also check for high fan out path. High fan out path is very critical in any of the synthesis design, because whenever your high fan out synthesis is done, let's say if I have not given max fan out user constraint, I have not limited it to 12, and I have let the tool decide how many fan outs it wants to keep, and it has kept 120 fan out somewhere. What will happen is there will be a small buffer, and it will be driving 120 nets, which is out of its capacity. So my whole design is going to break there. So we'll check for those kind of paths and timing at those kind of paths and make sure that it's well balanced. Okay. Then we will go through all the synthesis reports, performance reports, power reports, utilization reports, and we will see whether what we wanted to achieve at the synthesis stage, at least 50% of that is achieved. Because you are still going to go through so many stages later, floor plan placement, CTS route, that it's going to end up adding cells, wires, everything. It's going to get stricter. Your targets are going to get stricter. Your constraints are going to get stricter. So at least you should achieve 50% of your targets over here in synthesis. Okay. Then if everything is correct, you are pretty happy with the targets achieved, then you can proceed towards floor planning and place and route. Okay, this is where the synthesis as a stage ends, but synthesis also involves STA basics. So before going towards there, let's take some break, and you guys can ask me whatever questions you have until here. Let me know if you have some questions. You can write it over the chat. You can ask me whatever you feel like.
Ma'am,
Okay, great. So now,
can you repeat that part, that multiplier was introduced in the data path? So it has been placed in two different places. What is the effect or impact in design?
Okay, so what happens is, here, let's say it's not adder multiplier. It's something which is a combo logic. Okay. Now combo logic can be A plus B plus C. Okay. We can talk about it in the paint. So let's say this is my first flop. This is my second flop. Okay. And here there is this combo logic, which is nothing but, let me put it as in A plus B plus C. Now this A plus B plus C can be anything. Okay. Now this logic was taking 20 NS. And there is no way I can reduce this logic, right? This logic is very much reduced in itself. There is nothing which I can do to reduce the delay of it. And my clock period was 10 nanoseconds. So the data from here to here should reach in 10 nanoseconds, correct? Now it's not. So what the tool will do is, it will first try to remove some of the combo logic from here. It will just do A plus B over here. What it will do is, it will add one more flop over here, and the latter part, right, whatever A plus B is, let's say it's Y, A plus B is Y, then Y plus C it will do over here. So now what will happen is, this is going to take 10 nanoseconds. This is going to take 10 nanoseconds, but I have met the timing part for both the flops. Now the issue will come is, that my RTL had A plus B plus C till this flop, and now I'm changing it, and this one has A plus B only. Whenever I do functional equivalence check, it is gonna tell me that at deep in over here, RTL has some other Boolean equation, and you have some other Boolean equation. How are you gonna match it? So the tool has to be smart about that. What it's going to do is it is going to ask the tool that please consider this flop as transparent flop. Do not check logical equivalence here, but please go and check logical equivalence at the next flop. So when it does that, it automatically sees y plus c, which is ultimately a plus b plus c. So that is the kind of optimization it has to do, and it has to also set an attribute on this flop that this flop is not logic equivalent to the RTL flop, but the next flop will be logically equivalent to the RTL flop. You got my point?
Yes, got it, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, so the question is how DFT is implemented, automated tool or by manual. So there is a DFT compiler which is a part of synthesis tool itself. So which is called whenever the insert DFT stage starts, and it is done by an automated tool. It makes sure that it transforms all the flops into scan flops, puts the control signals, puts the observable output signals, and it does all that during that stage of the synthesis. It's a, I would say it's a compiler, it's a utility which is called during the synthesis, and it's a part, it's a utility of that tool itself. Sure. Anybody else? Okay. So you want me to proceed further with the STA basics, or we want to take a 5 minutes break? Also, anything you say?
Yeah, ma'am, we can proceed.
Sure. Okay. Okay. I'm going to start. Okay. Let's start. Okay. This is the STA is comes as a part of synthesis, but I'm gonna I have added this because you are gonna go through all the other stages of the VLSI design where nobody is gonna talk to you about STA basics, but this is a prerequisite where the speakers will expect you to know about it. Okay, so what is STA? So there are two type of timing analysis a design has to go through. Like it's a static timing analysis and a dynamic timing analysis. What we generally engineers do is called static timing analysis. Why? Because it's not a real-time simulation. It just calculates the delay through the all logical element the design has. So it's faster because you are not really caring about what is the logic. You just care about 0 to 1 or 1 to 0 you don't care about. You just see that 0 to 1 transition happens in how many seconds. So that is the kind of analysis you do over here. But still it is very exhaustive because it's not based on a certain input vectors like the scan part is done. Like ATPG generates a certain input vectors and checks the scan part of it. Here it's all based on delays. So it's very exhaustive. It takes care of whole design. It does not leave any of the timing parts. Now the second is dynamic timing analysis, which is real-time simulation with logical analysis, which is pretty much time taking, but it's very thorough and very useful for the design because it does it with the logical expressions also. But as physical design engineer, dynamic timing analysis is not done as a part of it. They do static timing analysis. They quickly make sure that that timing is not broken. Dynamic analysis is done by other team parallelly just to make sure that everything is logically correct. Okay, so we always use static timing analysis. Now, in the static timing analysis, your whole design is broken into timing paths. What are the different type of timing paths is shown over here. Let's say this is my design. This is the input port. Then input port to register is one timing path. This register flop to this flop is second timing path. This flop to output port is third timing path. And there can be paths, right, which are just doing nothing but traversing from input to output. Those are the into out. These are called feed throughs. This is fourth timing path. Okay. Now, how many paths exist over here do you see? So we always consider path between register to register, and if there is an input port on one side and output port on one side. Other than that, we traverse through all the combinational cell logic. Okay, so here if you see flip-flop 1 to flip-flop 3, there are two paths existing. Can you see? This is one path and this is second path. But the timing analysis will be based on these two paths. So even if this path is reaching in 4 nanoseconds, this cannot, and this due to having heavy combinational logic, it will not reach in 4 nanoseconds. Let's say it will reach in 8 or 12 nanoseconds. And if the clock period is 10 nanoseconds, then we still have to make sure that this path is meeting well. If it's 12 nanoseconds, we will optimize this all the cells. Maybe we will faster use the cells which are faster. Maybe we will swap the cells which are faster, and we'll make sure that from here to here the timing is met within 10 nanoseconds. And the third path is flop 2 to flop 3, which is nothing but this path. Okay. Now, which is the launcher flop, and which is the capture flop. So what happens is, in these two paths, the launch flop is flip-flop 1. The capture is flip-flop 3, and the second part is this one where the launch is flip-flop 2 and flip-flop 3. Now, let's say between these two flops, right, this flop, let's say UFF2 and UFF3, the clock of this and the clock of this will not be arriving at the same time. There will be definitely some difference when it arrives. So if you see over here, this is the launch path. It will be common till some point. The clock path will be common till some point. But as the clock tree synthesis has happened, there will be always a divergent path where it is different for launch, different for clock. And that difference between the clock arrival times is called skew. So please make sure you note it down, because this all is going to be used in next courses, and this is just prerequisite. Nobody is going to talk about this in depth. So this is called skew. Just make sure in mind. Okay. Now, what is setup? So what happens is, in the capture flop, right, the second flop which has to capture the data. Now at the capture flop, if the data, normally for correctly capturing the data, what should happen is the data should arrive before the clock arrives, correct? So that the data can be captured correctly and transferred on the output side. This time is usually set by the libraries. For certain kind of flip-flops and cells, it is usually set by the libraries, and we are supposed to make sure that our data reaches before that time. Now, if it arrives later than the clock, then wrong data is captured, and this difference in timing is called setup slack. Now, setup slack is measured at the next clock edge. If this is the launch, okay, the launch has already happened, the capture has to happen at the next clock edge, because this combinational logic will have one clock period of time to reach from this flop to this flop. So at the next edge, we will check the setup. Anybody has questions here? Okay. Now the second thing is hold. So what happens at the hold is, at the capture flop itself, let's say our data arrived before the setup time. It is correctly captured. but it should be held little longer also after the clock edge has arrived. Why? Because data has to be registered properly inside the flop and then it transfers actually. It's not that once it captured it properly, it can be immediately transferred to the output. It has to be registered clearly and then it can transfer it into the output. So that is called the hold time requirement. So if the data comes here early, it does not stay for that hold amount of time and it changes, then what happens is the data gets missed. You totally miss the data and you transfer something else itself. This difference is called hold slack, and hold slack is always measured at the same edge, because at the same edge you are supposed to hold the data for a while. Okay. Okay. Now we are going to talk about the false path and multi-cycle path, for which the user had set constraints, right? If you remember, user constraints we were setting as IO delay paths, multi-cycle paths, false paths, and max delay paths. So false path is what I'm going to talk about over here. Now what happens, this is my question to you guys. Let's say my select line is 0 and this is simple mux. So whenever my select line is 0, A will pass. Whenever my select line is 1, B will pass. The same is over here. Whenever my select line is 0, this path will be on. And whenever my select line is 1, this path will be on. So can you tell me that whenever my select line is 0, will there be a path from B to out? Will you see a path from B to out? Will it be transferred?
No.
Yeah. So what happens is we will have to tell the design that.
No.
Yeah. That please, whenever I'm setting select line as 0, my B to out path is a false path. Please don't do timing calculations over there because there is nothing you are going to see over there. Okay. And same is set for select line 1. At that point of time, A to out is not going to pass. Okay. So that is how we set the user constraints for false paths, so that the tool doesn't waste any time in doing this kind of timing analysis. Now, the multi-cycle path. As I told you, right, in the retime when pipelining, that if my clock period is 10 nanosecond, if my combo logic is taking 20 nanosecond, and there is no way I can reduce that 20 nanosecond to 10 nanosecond, then what do? I tell the tool that, okay, please do the timing analysis at this capture flop after 2 clock period. So it will understand that the data path delay is not going to be 10 nanoseconds, but it's going to be 2 into 10, which is 20 nanoseconds. So that is how we set the multi-cycle path for static timing analysis. What will happen is at the capture flop, the setup will be checked at the second edge of it, not at the 10 nanoseconds, but at the 20 nanoseconds. Okay, that is where the setup will be checked. Okay, so this is one of the references which I have attached over here, which I'm hoping that you guys will go through as a homework or something, which will help you understand all the next topics very easily. And I'm going to share my PDF with you all guys. So please go through it and let me know if you have questions. We have completed pretty much early, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, madam. Already one participant has put a question in the chat box. Dr. Suresh Kumar has asked that how the DFT is implemented,
Oh,
automated tool or by manual tool?
Yes. I think I answered Dr. Suresh, if you heard me. DFT is always implemented by an automated utility, which is a part of synthesis tools. So it's not done manual because there are so many flops in the design which you cannot manually test and which you cannot manually transform into scan flops. So for that, we always used one DFT compiler utility along with the tool which we used for synthesis.
Any other participants? If you want to ask any question to the expert, you can ask right now. We are having enough time to discuss your doubts.
Hello, ma'am. I
Yeah.
have one doubt that the fan out which you told, tell me something about the how you will use the fan out thing over here.
Sure. So what happens is during my synthesis, let's say this is my one net, okay, and it has let's say a buffer which is pretty small with the drive strength of 2. 2 is W by L2, right? Now it's very much evident that your such a small buffer is not gonna be able to traverse, or it's not gonna be able to drive more than certain fan outs. Okay, let's say if I'm using 3 fan outs and they have this or any cells in the design will have an output capacitive load capacity which it can drive. Let's say it can drive only 20 picofarads. Okay, but the input capacitance of all these buffers over here is like 10 picofarads, 10 picofarads, 10 picofarads. Then what will happen is the total capacitive load which is it's seeing is 30 picofarads, right? So it will definitely not be able to drive. And what will happen to the transition over here is, let's say here, if my transition is something like this from 0 to 1, okay, here what is going to happen is all these buffers are going to see something like this, correct? And now we all know that the delay which we consider from 10% of value to 90% of transition, and the delay of here, if you consider 90% of the value, let's say here, and 90% of the value here, the delay is much more, right? It's much more, it's significant, and it is going to affect your whole timing analysis, correct? So what will happen is I will ask the tool that please set some max fan out constraint. I'm going to set it up myself that for any such kind of fan outs where it's going out of hand, where it's going out of limit, I'm going to set a limit onto that. Even after that, that can happen that let's say if this load was not even there, but this was 15, this was 15 picofarads, and this was also 15 picofarads. In that case also, this buffer is not going to be able to drive. So what will happen is now the tool will does the resizing of it. What it will do is instead of W by L 2 over here, it will change that 2 to 6 or 4 or something, which will automatically have some additional capacity of driving the load, which will be something around 60 picofarads. So this is what we mean by high fan out synthesis. This is what it does when it sees multiple fan outs. And the fan out is nothing but the number of sync points a certain cell is driving. Here the fan out is 3. You got my point?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else?
Hello, ma'am. May I want to know in for a
Sure.
physical as a fresher for a physical design engineer, if you any student wants to
Mm-hmm.
pursue,
Mm-hmm.
then what are the prerequisites or what are the skills he or she would need to know?
So, see, there are two different things I would like to say. One is when you say as a fresher, as a BTech or BE engineer, the expectations or prerequisites are pretty much less. You should know the basic VLSI design flow. You should know what every stages go through, starting from RTL to routing, and that should be enough. And you should have basic CMOS knowledge, which has to be very strong at all the point of time. Okay, your basic should be very strong. The The CMOS basics should be very strong and the timing basics should be very strong. But when you are as a fresher from MTech, the expectation is much more higher. I mean, for every stages, clock, route, DFT, testing, verification, VHDL knowledge, Verilog knowledge, all this should be very sharp. And along with that, CMOS logic is must required at any point of time. So these are the two different sets of skills which are required. And please stay connected with me. I'll be sharing some links where you can, strengthen your knowledge about it, which are pretty simple sites which give you an information in pretty simple words. And only thing is you don't have to know hi-fi stuff, but simplicity at its best. You should know the basics very sharply. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Anybody else wants to ask anything? As we have time, you can ask me about any other stages also. Or sir, do we have some questions answer session or something like that?
Madam, we are just waiting. We are just waiting for others to ask a question. If
Okay,
they are
sure.
not having much, then we can conclude the session even.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Sure.
Any participants?
Yes, yes. Just I want to ask about there are certain low power VLSI circuits. So what are the different testing techniques we can use for it?
So when you say testing, whether do you want to test power or you want to test function, or what kind of testing you are
Power.
talking? Power.
I want to test if I wanted to test the power, then
Okay. Then see what happens is basic testing, any power characterizations tool remain the same. Okay. The device change, any low power circuit which you have made will be using the cells based on your low power requirements. So the testing scenario still remains the same. What changes it? What kind of cells you are using? If your, the power, the expectation is dynamic power consumption can be anything, but the leakage should be less. Then you will always end up using high VT cells, right? So that is how your low power circuit will be built. Let's say you want to have that, okay, leakage I'm still okay with, but my dynamic power consumption is high. Then the cells which you are going to use, specifically the clock cells, should have minimum, switching activity factor. Whenever it's switching the transition from 0 to 1, 1 to 0, it should consume the less power. So the requirement will change based on what kind of cells you will use. The testing theory, the testing equipment and environment will always remain same.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Sure.
Madam, Mr. Narayan is asking that which is the best tool for synthesis?
So there are two, I would say, competitive vendors, Cadence and Synopsys, and they both have their pros and cons, and the fabrication units or the companies which are having their own fabs use them both actually, based on their requirements. So I would say that we use Synopsys because our libraries are Synopsys built or something like that. Then if we are using the synthesis tool from Synopsys, we will be using the verification tool from Cadence, because that's how you make sure that the design is more robust. If you are using the synthesis tool from Cadence, you will use verification tool from synthesis. So pretty much all the industries use both the kind of tools. There are certain other industries coming with newer tools also. Synopsys has came up with a new kind of fusion tool which has all these activities combined into one stage. So it all depends on what kind of product you want to define, what kind of libraries are you using, whether you are using ARM libraries, then which kind of tool is more efficient in making more efficient use of those kind of libraries. So it's all trade-off between your targets and the customer requirements.
Another question is from Ms. Puspa that after RTL we'll get LUT design. So what exactly that design consists of?
By LUT, what do you mean? Lookup table? Ms. Pushpa, can you hear me? Okay, I am just gonna assume she is meaning some Boolean equation lookup table kind of design. It will have nothing Pushpa, but as we talked about the same netlist, which will have all the gates and gate level information inside that. There will be two stages where you can call it that it is a netlist is once the RTL is compiled into generic technology independent netlist, which will have only gate level information but not the technology information. And after that, it will map to technology when we will have the netlist, which will have gate information along with technology, which you can take it forward for the productization. I hope I have answered her question.
Mr. Srinivas is asking that can we have any open source CAD tools?
Oh yeah, sure. Yes. So yes, I'll share you some links. There are some open sources where you can synthesize, where you can learn how to turn your RTL into netlist forms, and it's a very good open source tool. There are many trainings available on that. I'm definitely remind me. I'm going to send the links for that.
Similar question is from Mrs. Anish Fatima that Synopsys and Cadence are not available during the lockdown. So any open source tool?
Yes. I don't remember the open source tool name, but there are trainings available on that. I'm definitely gonna send it. And Synopsys and Cadence, maybe offline trainings are not available, but there are still some online trainings going on. If I find them, I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay, any other participants? If you want to ask any question to the expert.
Ma'am, can you highlight the job opportunities in this field?
It's similar everywhere, I would say. See, VLSI design consists of different fields, whether it's RTL design, circuit design, or physical design. Physical design also has its subdomains like testing and actual design. The design part is 30%, the testing part has to be 70%. So, that is how the whole industry is divided. So if you see, you will see more opportunities available on testing, but less opportunities available on design. But that does not mean that design does not have any opportunities available. But this is how it's divided. And I would say if you have basic CMOS level knowledge, and once you go through this training, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be really helpful to get into specific VLSI design kind of opportunities. Please go through this. I have seen this for the first time, that it's very thorough, and it will enhance your knowledge up to a certain extent where you can even start applying. So, and there are opportunities outside. I mean, there are opportunities. It's nothing like that the industries are going through a lame period or anything. In fact, during the lockdown, the vacancies have increased. The products they had in mind, the companies had in mind for such a long time, now they are coming into reality. So the vacancies are going to increase, not decrease at all. Okay. So
Madam, next question is any low power simulation open source tools?
Low power simulation, I'll have to think about it. Low power has many different aspects. That's why I'm not sure about simulation tools. But any open source tool for synthesis will have some low power capability into it. I haven't really gone through it too much to understand what kind of level of extent they have. But if I find some, I'll send it. But I don't think there is a specific low power simulation open source tools available.
Next question is, what nanometer technology is being used by industries now?
IBM has come up with 2 nanometers. I don't know what's next, but recently the industries are at 532. Next could be one very pretty soon. So we have to think about what's next now.
And next question is, can we have details about front end and back end design in VLSI, and up to what level Mentor graphics help?
Okay, sure. So front end and back end design in VLSI is something like RTL verification is called front end. In some of the industries, even synthesis is called front end, and backend starts after synthesis starts. For me at Intel, backend starts as soon as the RTL is verified. After that, everything is backend. So synthesis, place and route, sign off, reliability verification, power measurements, everything is done in backend, whereas RTL is RTL, test bench requirements, RTL verification, some part of DFT also. All this is considered as front end. Circuit design in some cases. So that is front end, and the backend starts either from the synthesis or once the synthesis is done. That depends on the industry which you are working in. Okay. The next question was, up to what level Mentor graphics help? You mean Mentor graphics help in what? To what level Mentor graphics help? I'm pretty much sure your question is just a follow-up question about. So again, Srinivasa, it depends on the industry, the theme which you're applying for. So the Mentor Graphics is an EDA tool vendor. It does almost everything. So even if it will have front end and back end CAD design teams inside. I'm not sure. There is one of the speaker tomorrow is going to be from Mentor Graphics. I think he will be able to tell you more about Mentor Graphics specifically. But it has the EDA tools in front end and in back end both. It all depends on which team are you talking with. So that kind of help you can get it with. But yes, the tomorrow speaker is going to be able to answer your question properly.
Hello, ma'am. This is Narayan from Karnataka.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. I'd like to know regarding what may be the difference between the software which we use in academics and industries, to be specific.
Okay. Okay. So there is going to be a vast difference, Mr. Narayan. What is happening is the softwares which are used in academic are very much constrained at the basic specifications or parameters at certain technology node. What we learn at certain technology node is this technology has silicon dioxide thickness of that. It has 2-3 VT variants probably. It has 2 different poly materials. It has only one metal material, which is either copper or aluminum, and based on that the delay calculations are done, and you probably make the circuit out of that. Whereas when you go into industries, there the the extent of the parameters, the specification is vast as ocean. You can change the metal layer thickness also, which I am not sure the academic tools does. They can only give you an information about this metal layer has this much RC delay value, but how to change it, whether you can change the thickness, the width, the spacing, the material, you can include aluminum and copper in that. You can change the silicon dioxide values to multiple extent. All these are vast ocean full of parameters which you can see at the industrial level. And at the industrial level, there are certain design aspects which are not open to academic, which is like the latest technology node itself. They will not open up every secrets of the latest technology at the academic level. That will be there only at the industrial tools. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it will be only in terms of layouts and all.
No. It will be many other things. Like we will be there. You might be using the same tool for making the circuit and timing analysis also. Here we have a certain different tool for timing analysis, which does the exhaustive timing analysis. There might not be a case where you will see a false path or multi-cycle path or half cycle path or anything such like that. Here we will have analysis for that. There might not be tool available at academics where you can make timing analysis between a latch and a flop. Here we will have that. So that is the kind of differences they'll keep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other participant? Madam, you can stop the sharing of your screen.
Sure.
Any other participant, if you want to ask? Dr. Suresh is thanking you, madam, for very useful session delivered by you.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh.
Anyone else wants to ask anything to the expert of the session right now? I don't think that now there is any questionnaires from the participants, ma'am.
Okay, sure.
One message is getting pop up. Okay. All are just thanking you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So, if not further is to be discussed, then can we conclude the session, madam?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay. So,
and I will share the PDF, and along with I'll share some links for the.
Okay. Surely, madam. On behalf of Electronics and Communication Department of GEC Rajkot, which is actually your home department, as you are alumni of the department only, we are really heartily thanking you to spare your valuable time from your busy schedules at industry, and thank you for sharing such informative session and really solving the doubts of the participants in a really good manner. So heartily thank you for that. Even participants are thanking you.
It was a very interactive session. Even I enjoyed a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All the participants,
Thank you, ma'am.
We are again going to start at 4 o'clock. Yes, madam is going to share the PPT and useful links. It will be available in the file section of our team, so you can get it from that. The next session would be starting at 4 o'clock. So again, be in the time and join the session, third session for the today, which is nothing but the hands-on session, and it will be delivered by again our coordinator only, Dr. Koringa sir. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Bye.